Your computer's processor is also called the Central Processing Unit, or CPU. The key word is central. This is the component of the computer that controls everything else. It tells your video card what to display on the screen, it tells your RAM what information to read or write, and it also interprets the inputs from your keyboard and mouse. To the eye, most computer processors are going to look exactly like this, they might have different lettering. Also, one other thing is the number of pins. Unless you want to count those pins, which can be upwards of 1,500 or so, they're all going to look pretty much exactly like. One widely used term when talking about CPUs is architecture. The architecture just simply refers to what kind of technology the processor's manufacturer used in that particular processor. A single manufacturer may put out CPUs with a different kind of architecture at the same time. These are targeted for different audiences. For example, one architecture may be good for computing very complex mathematics, while the other may be good for doing simple tasks like running Office or checking your email. You wouldn't want to use the processor good at complex mathematics in your home computer because it's not going to run Windows or Office very well. But an astrophysicist trying to figure out the universe may want that kind of power. The most common specification referred to when talking about your CPU is your clock rate. You've probably heard people talking about their computer having a 2.6 gigahertz processor or something similar. They were referring to their computer's processor's clock rate. This is basically the number of electrical signals that your processor can handle at any one moment in time. In the case of a 2.6 gigahertz processor, that would be 2.6 billion signals per second. I'll start with cores. What is a core? Well, basically a core is a processor inside of your processor. Not every computer processor has the same number of cores. Some very low-end CPUs only have one core, while the higher-end CPUs may have up to 6. Say, less than 10 years ago, if you wanted to have more than one processor in your computer, you would have to spend a whole buttload of cash to get the proper motherboard, and even then your computer's software wouldn't be able to properly recognize the extra hardware unless it was specifically written to do so. So using cores instead of multiple processors has helped solve this problem. Software still needs to be written to take advantage of the multiple cores. However, since they are all on one chip here, the processor itself, even if the software isn't optimized, can use all the cores. This isn't as efficient as the software doing it, but it still makes sure that all the extra power that you have isn't for naught. Alright, now that you know what a core is, let's move on to cache. Every processor has a small amount of memory that stores information that is going to be used in the very near future. This memory is called the cache. The sole reason for this memory is speed. Normally any information that your processor needs to use multiple times, normally, any information that your CPU needs to access is stored in the RAM. However, if there's information that your CPU needs to access multiple times, that information is stored in the cache because it's much faster to retrieve that information than retrieving it from the RAM. So now that you understand what cores and cache are, now we'll talk about threads. A thread can be considered a task that is assigned to the processor. Just a few short years ago, most CPUs could only perform work on a single thread, i.e. do a single task at a time. These days, most mid-range processors and all high-end processors are going to be what's called multi-threaded. This means that they can perform multiple tasks at the same time. Current generation technology, however, is only still limited at 2 threads, but that is 2 threads per core. So say your computer CPU has 3 cores and 2 threads, that would be like having 6 processors inside of your computer. Double that to 6 cores, and you double the number of processors to basically 12. That's 12 tasks at one time. Technologies such as multiple cores and multi-threading have greatly increased performance of the personal computer without having to rely on a pure speed increase, such as going from 3 gigahertz to 3.3 gigahertz. That is why when comparing different processors of different architectures, it is necessary to pay attention to the number of cores, the number of threads per core, the amount of cache that the CPU has, and then finally the clock rate.